Hello, you are listening to the Child Care Director's Chair podcast. Your host, Erica Sacosio, invites you to join her community of passionate and inspiring leaders in the ECE field, where she discusses, reflects, and shares the best ways to invest in our children, families, teachers, and community. Because after all, we know they are the heartbeat of any successful program.
Hey guys, Erica Sacosio here with the Child Care Director's Chair podcast. It must be Wednesday because it's guest day. So I'm very, very excited about that. To all of our loyal listeners, thank you so very much for tuning in every single day. Your support means the world to us. And so thank you. You continue to show up for us every day. And so while you do that, I'm going to show up for you every day as well. Hopefully you'll find today's episode inspiring. We have a wonderful podcaster who is on our show today, an educator. And so let me introduce, I'm going to just do her bio really quick. Leslie Dudley Corbell. Did I pronounce that right?
You did.
Perfect. All right. She is the co-host of the Christian parenting podcast, The Mind of a Child, which they launched in November of 2022. Their goal was to guide parents throughout the world, and with 30 years of early childhood education and childcare background, Leslie began her career as a research assistant in a NIH-funded study. Now based in Arkansas, right? Yeah.
Arkansas.
Based in Arkansas, she serves as a trainer, consultant, and coach to childcare programs statewide, empowering educators and families to create nurturing environments. Leslie's passion lies in protecting and nurturing the wonder of childhood, which I love. So happy to talk about that today, and supporting educators and parents alike through personalized coaching and engaging training sessions. So thank you so much for coming on our show. We're so happy to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Leslie, just to give people, that's the official bio. Just to tell folks a little bit about yourself beyond the accolades. Tell folks a little bit about yourself and how you came into this work.
Okay, so I have two kids myself. They're grown adults now, and as a parent and as a childcare worker, I've, like you mentioned, the wonder of childhood. I just love stepping into that world with them and wanted to share that with others. I kind of stumbled into the field by accident, actually. I was working in a public relations job back in the late 80s, early 90s, and I was with a corporation, and of course with the big stock market crash, they ended up closing their communications office. They didn't want to talk to the public anymore. So I lost that job, ended, and I stumbled into that NIH-funded job and just became fascinated by the world of early childhood education. So that was sort of my introduction into it, and took some time off when I had my children when they were young, and then stepped back into the field later. It's been a lot of fun helping program staff and administrators at various levels, private organizations, state-funded organizations, home care. So
yeah. So it's interesting. I always like to ask folks how they come to the field, because more times than not, it isn't like I woke up one day and decided I was going to become an educator.
Right.
It's usually not that. I mean, that happens for a very small amount of people, but a lot of times they come through way of something else. So I always think that is interesting. So I like to ask folks that.
It is fun to see this story, because especially when you think about, okay, so now with the podcast, I'm doing the podcast. So when I was a little girl, I grew up watching all the variety shows, Cher and Sonny and Cher, the Glenn Campbell show, and Carol Burnett. And I really wanted to be a variety show host. So it's almost like now, finally,
you have your own show.
I have my own show, and it's about childhood education and the wonder of childhood. So
I love it.
Come together.
I love it. Full circle in life. So today we're going to talk about creating positive and supportive environments for children, and working with children who have challenging behaviors, because we know that there's been a little bit of a shift over the last 4 years. Some of it could be COVID related. Some of it could also be technology related. Some of it could just be family dynamic related. There's a lot of reasons. We know that children can have challenging behaviors, but we also know as educators that the environment plays a big role, positively or negatively, in that aspect. So I really wanted to kind of dig into and talk about that today. So let's start with, what does it mean to create a child-focused environment in an educational setting, especially when working with children who might have challenging behaviors?
Yeah, that's the way I like to look at that is we know that best practice is good for all children. So, and then we think about children with challenging behaviors, they need more best practice. It's almost like a doubling down on best practice. So when I work with teachers and programs about their environment, it always goes down to the foundation. How are we really doing the things that we know to do? And let's look back and make sure we're doing those things that we know to do. Because if we, rather than focusing in on the child with a challenged behavior, go back to the drawing board, go back to the foundational elements. We want consistency. We want a routine. We want a well-organized environment. We want to have appropriate materials for children of all the developmental levels in the room. So we go back to that and start there. And then the other thing we want to think about, often there's a shift that needs to happen. We want to shift rather than see the child's behavior that we're trying to stop. We want to look at that behavior and think about what message is that behavior sending us. It's letting us know a child needs help solving some problem. They either need help feeling safe or they need to be more connected. So if we look at it that way, then it automatically starts opening up our eyes to what elements of the classroom might need to be strengthened.
Yeah. And in my experience too, for the educators, I feel like a lot of times they spend so much energy focused in on this behavior that they don't see the other children in the classroom who are doing, what is expected, right? We spend a lot of energy on that. And how do I say, I mean, you've been in the field a long time, so have I. How do directors help people who not maybe entry level, but maybe mid-level, right? How do we help them understand to stop focusing on the behavior, but like you said, the child, and how to support them?
Well, first, there has to be willingness on the part of the teacher that you're working with to try some new things, maybe shift their focus to something. So you want to build relationship with that teacher and let them know that you are someone they can trust, that you understand the challenges they're experiencing in the classroom, and find willingness to try some new things and brainstorm with them.
Yeah. And I think not only the willingness for them, but also for them to understand that there isn't a magic bullet, if you will. There's not a magic potion, and things take time, right? Because whatever that behavior is, there's probably a pretty good chance that behavior was reinforced. Maybe not on purpose, but was reinforced, right? I know if I throw a tantrum, eventually I'm probably going to get what I want from the grown-ups around me, right? Because they want me to stop throwing the tantrum. Kids are very, very smart. And so they figure that out. So as the adults, have we reinforced some of this behavior that we don't really want? What would you say like the biggest challenge is, like as you're a trainer and you go out to programs, what have you found is the biggest challenge around working with children who, may be struggling?
It's the biggest challenge to teachers or directors? Or
I would say for the teachers.
Okay. I think the biggest thing and where teachers often start with is their own composure and their ability to not be triggered by a child's behavior. Because just Diane and I on our podcast will say, parenting begins in childhood. You parent from the way you were parented. And so you can have certain events happen. What might be triggering to one teacher may not be triggering to another child. So it's really, to another teacher. It's not the behavior itself that's a challenge. It's our perception of the behavior that is challenging.
Yeah.
So
and our own triggers, like you said, in our own triggers, our own biases. Yeah.
So the first step is to learn to manage, to identify whenever you start feeling that feeling of anxiousness come up, that bubble up in you in the classroom. Oh no, not this, not again. This child can't be doing that again. To really address that, to have calming strategies that you practice and use, have visuals posted to let you know to take 3 deep breaths and think, I'm safe, I'm calm. How can I help this child solve their problem? Yeah. And I'm speaking from experience, because there were children's behaviors that would trigger things in me sometimes. again, it might trigger me, but it might not trigger you, Erica. You might have a totally different set of behaviors. But if I could say that and de-escalate my energy, then I could show up for the child in front of me, and you'd be amazed at the difference that makes when we don't respond with energy like.
Yeah. So I think a few directors probably going to be able to relate to this statement. So there will be times that I could see, we have cameras in our school. I can see by a teacher's body language. I can't hear them. I can see by their body language that the teacher may be struggling, and I'll walk in the room and I'll speak to the child, and the child will instantly do what I ask them to do, almost immediately. And they go, well, that's because you're the principal, or that's because of the, I'm like, no, it's because me and that child have a relationship. And that also my body language is totally different than what your body language is right now. So, but again, that comes from being a skilled educator who's been in the field for a really long time, and knowing that child and making sure I took the time to know that child, and checking in also with the family, like, is anything going on? Has something changed? Especially if it's a new behavior, right? I think that there's that too. Is this an ongoing behavior, or is this a new behavior? Because those also can be handled differently.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Body language. And so that is something, we have to be aware of first, and then work on changing that dynamic.
Yeah.
We can't have a power struggle with the child if we don't enter into it.
No, for sure. And that brings up a great point too. A lot of times, when folks are still kind of new in the field, they want to try to tackle the problem while the problem is happening, instead of being a little bit more preventive and like, let me set up a good system in my classroom so that these things don't happen. Like, for an example, if you have two children who constantly fight over the same truck, there's a few things we can do, right? Maybe they earn time for that truck. Maybe we have two trucks, maybe, so there's things that we know, like, okay, I see this happening. It's happening day after day. What can I do to set it up so that that doesn't happen? So I think having those preventative measures in place. And I also think when you use good strategies, or as you said, best practice works for all children, not just those who are struggling, right? So I think when we do that, when we have good systems, we prevent a lot of the challenging behaviors right at the beginning. And then it's, just a few that we've got to work with,
So let's take that example and kind of break it down a little bit, and all different ways we could approach that, and what we might do in the short term and in the long term. So, one idea, as you mentioned, was having two trucks. We can make sure there's two trucks. We can also proactively start teaching the children how to ask for a turn. May I play with that truck? Because lots of conflict happens from play entry and play intrusion.
Yeah.
I don't know how to ask you if I can play with what you're playing. I see it there. I'm just going to start playing with it. Or you're building something that looks like fun. I'm just going to start building with you. That will typically cause a conflict. So really focusing in on those social skills of asking for a turn, asking if I can play with you, inviting others to play with you. There's a whole bit of teaching that happens right there that's going to be helpful to all children, as well as the child who's really struggling with that. So that's one piece. Another piece is, well, sometimes you're going to ask for a turn and the other child is going to say no. And in fact, one time I was at a program modeling this for them, and I was one of my first times to model at this site, and I was really, I was wanting to make a good impression and really win some teachers over. And so I saw two kids, and they were fighting over a tricycle. And so I went through that whole thing. One was getting ready to sock the other one. And I was like, oh, you're getting really frustrated. You wanted to ride that tricycle. You can ask him if you can have a turn when he's finished. And so the little boy he's holding it together, and he says, can I have a turn? And the other little boy says, when I'm finished, he says, but I'm going to ride a really long, long time. And he took off. And so the other little boy jumps on another tricycle and begins pedaling after him. So I was afraid that there was going to be a big event happen on the other side of the playground, and I ran over there, and the little boy pulls up to the other one like it's the OK Corral, getting ready to be a big event, and the little boy says, okay, now I'm finished. But we don't know how things are going to play out with children.
Yeah.
If we give them the tools, they will use them. So sometimes it is that you have to help children handle the emotional distress. Well, you can't have the turn right now.
Yeah.
You're going to have to wait, and that's hard. And you're really disappointed you were hoping to play right now.
Yeah.
You can handle it. So there's so many things that we can teach to children within that, rather than just focusing on how I can stop the behavior. I'm going to give the skills to the children, because this is going to come up again. It may not be the cars this time. It's going to be the tricycles next time. So if we can shift our focus to that, then automatically we have lots of things we can do.
Yeah. And I love that example, because there's so many other things that children can learn from that. Using their vocabulary, being, using please, and being courteous of other people, and then articulating their feelings. Like, I can see you're frustrated, right? Because they know they feel something, but depending on the age, they may not be able to say it. Like, I'm really frustrated right now, right? It usually comes out, I'm not your best friend anymore.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right. Which means I'm disappointed in whatever it is you've just said to me. I'm disappointed, and I don't approve the message. Right.
Yes.
Yes. So, and teaching and the social skills that come with that too, by you articulating what they're feeling, how to handle these situations, as you said, they're skills that then they can use in other situations. So I love how you said that. Can you share some key principles or philosophies that guide your approach to creating a positive and supportive environment for all children?
2 key principles I have are: structure brings order to chaos. It's structure, not control. So we can't control children's behavior, and we can't control what's going to happen. But if we provide structure to children in the learning environment, we want to have well-ordered and centers of play that are visually organized, that children know what to do, where to put things when they're finished. If it's real clear, that tends to calm children, and they know what's expected of them.
Yes.
I've been into programs that may be more I don't want to say disorganized, but not. Think about going into someone's house, and you walk in their house and you can see, well, there's a place over there for sitting and conversation, and there's the table, that's where they eat dinner, and this place over here looks so inviting, I could read a book. So if we can approach that to how we create our environment, that guides the children's activities. So the structure, not control, brings order to chaos. And so even thinking that in terms of transitions, well, I want to have structure, things to do, have a clear idea of what's going on, have activities for the children and a purpose for what's happening. I'm not going to try to control them. I'm just going to structure it. Another principle is that relationships, they are the cradle of learning, and they wash away all sins. If we can have a relationship with every children and really focus on that, that's our entry point.
Yeah. Because I believe in that philosophy as well, which is, at one point I had 6 childcare centers, and I cut it down to 3 because for me, it felt really good to have a relationship with the children, my families, and my staff. So that was the number for me, and everybody is different. But I think that relationship is important, and one in which at my school goes for many, many years. I will have children as young as infant up to 12 years old. So I could potentially be with the child for 10 to 12 years of their life, if you talk about looping in education. So I think that, and I love how you said, kind of like, it's not really chaos, it's, it's structured. We started using trays, almost like on the idea of Montessori, I guess. We started using trees because I felt like it helped children with understanding, these are my materials, those are your material. So it helped them with boundaries and space, but visually. And then also when we put things back, you could visually very quickly see that these things go on that shelf. They don't go on that shelf because the color of the bin is different, right? Because if children can't read, right, we could do pictures, they can match up the pictures, but forget about trying to get a 2.5-year-old to match up the pictures, right? But is a very easy system to say, okay, this tray or this, is color coded. So things like that, systems like that do make it, a lot easier for everybody too. At the end of the night, you're walking in and you go, okay, like there's a balloon there, But yeah, I think we all need that.
Absolutely. And I think about, we want a developmentally appropriate play-based environment, and we add this structure to it. Like you said, I love trays. I mean, children need those sort of visual boundaries to kind of help them relax and feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
Said, no, this is my space, and this, they can know that. And then they're able to freely explore within that space. And I just think that's a wonderful thing to add.
Yeah. So, we talked about relationships. So let's talk about, like, how do you establish these trust in building relationships with children who may exhibit, behaviors that maybe that they trigger, or you're like, oh, they didn't call out today. Like, because we're being honest, right? This is, everybody's got that, maybe that one kid who really, like, I just can't get to them, right? So what's your best advice in, establishing that trust and building positive relationships with children who might be challenging?
Yeah. So when I think of children who may be relationship resistant, possibly, we don't know. And one thing I always say with the work that I do is that I don't know, since I'm coming into classrooms and I don't know the children, and that information isn't shared with me, to me, it never really mattered what the diagnosis was. The behaviors would be the same, whether the child was coming from a trauma background or from an autism background, just a spectrum background. If a child was relationship resistant, there were several things that you could do. One was be very calm and composed and really work on yourself and your demeanor and your presence with the child. Then, as you're looking for those really meaningful one-on-one interactions with the child, so let's say every child in the classroom, I'm going to have a greeting. When they come in the door, I'm going to make sure I give them eye contact. I'm going to make sure I have some gentle, appropriate touch. My full presence is going to be there. I'm going to say their name, and I'm going to do that for all children.
Yeah.
Now, for the child who may be relationship resistant, I'm going to try to add in an additional one-on-one, just a playful moment here and there with them. And I'm going to start trying to see what they're interested in and see if I can find something in common with them.
Yes.
Oh, you're coloring with the color blue today. I like blue. That's my favorite color too. Just find something in common and start conversations with them.
Yep.
Try to get more. If they like to play ball, we'll play catch with them and just really join in those moments. And then I think it's especially important then when they do experience that big upset moment that it's going to happen, to make sure you can show up for them in that moment.
Yeah.
That you can stay calm. You can validate their experience. You seem really frustrated. You wanted to sit in this chair at lunch and someone else is sitting there first.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. Yeah. That's great advice. Yeah.
That's when those attachment things start happening. Every child needs a person. So make sure that every child in your classroom has a person that they feel safe with, even when they have the meltdown.
So I can relate to that quite a bit from a parenting standpoint. So I have two children. One is biological, one is adopted. And when we adopted our son, the first thing they said, well, he has this, list of diagnoses, and reactive attachment disorder was one of them. And so he's 22 now, and you still can kind of see that throughout their life. But, attachment is so important, and that's why it's fundamental to children's success to find that person, have, or multiple people who they feel safe with, and usually the kids who are acting, or having challenges, it's because they do need something. They're crying out for help, and they're looking to you for help. And sometimes when it seems like it's always you that they're acting out for, maybe that's them saying, I need something from you specifically.
Yes. I need to feel safe, and I need to feel connected, and that right. And they're asking for something. And something you point out about attachment, I always think about too, when children, let's say they're relationship resistant, they're struggling with it, finding a person in the classroom, you may finally make a connection with them. It's like, okay, I'm making inroads. And to remember that it's to be vulnerable like that, and for them to open up to you, especially if they have experienced hurt in a relationship in that context, they can feel very vulnerable, and that may not feel safe, and they may then have a big behavior once again. So you can make 2 steps forward and then make 1 step backwards. And just
Yeah.
remember to still show up to still remain calm, to still look at them as needing your help, and then you'll keep moving on again. So just kind of be ready for that. That could happen.
You know what I find interesting when you do your course study? I find that a lot of the courses, when you're a teacher and you're going through the rigors, there should be many classes on working with children who have behavioral challenges, and there really isn't. You can elect them, but I feel like there should be some requirement that you have a certain amount, right? Just like psychology, right? We have to take 3 psych classes, right? General psych, there's many psych classes, but you have to take at least 3. I feel like there should be something around working with children who have challenging behavior as part of your requirement, because as an educator, there's no way that you're going to have a classroom where you're not going to experience that at some point in your career.
And I think that's a good point. And for me, what I would say is to always remember that best practice is good for all children. And some kids just need more doses of it. So again, let's take another example. I think visual schedules. We know that picture schedules are helpful to all children. That if they have pictures of them going through the routine of their day, then that the teacher used that schedule throughout the day, refers to it. Okay, looks like what's next? Centers are next. What did we just finish? Breakfast. Let's turn over breakfast. And here we are. And that doesn't always happen. I mean, that's a best practice example, but
You're right. It doesn't always happen.
It doesn't happen. So going back to those foundational best practice things and doing them. And so now let's say, okay, a teacher's doing that, but she still has one child who's struggling throughout the day. Well, I had one teacher, so what she did was she made a schedule and put it on a lanyard, because as it turned out, this child was having different caregivers pick them up in the afternoon. So it was increasing their sense of anxiety about the day because they really couldn't keep up with who was showing up.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't hold that in their head.
Yeah.
So they put the schedule on on a lanyard. The child, or they could put it in the cubby, could look through the pictures and see what the day was like and see who was picking them up. Well, the behaviors dissipate.
Wow. Yeah.
The child felt safe. They could start connecting in the classroom and they could start learning. So that's just to me a good example of best practice. Let's make sure we're doing it. Now, if you need to do more, let's individualize the best practice.
Yeah. I love that example. And here's why. When I think about challenging behaviors, when I really think about the time frame, I think most of it happens in most cases early in the morning when they're getting dropped off, towards the end of the night when people start picking up and children might get anxiety about why I don't want to be last. I don't want to be last, right? Or in that time. Like, I feel like those are times that it's very heightened where a child, so we know that as educators. So what additional things can we do in those time spots to help alleviate some of the stress, anxiety, the separation, or feeling like you're left out, no one's coming to get you, or I don't want to sleep here because I don't want to. I want to be at home, or they're used to their very regimented way that they sleep at home. You take a bath, you read a story, all the things that you're used to that bring you into a calm space to be ready to rest. Like, children play all day and they were running around outside, they were eating lunch, and it's like, stop, no, everybody sleep.
Yeah.
Right. There's that, if you're smart about it, you'll build that transition, like you said, that transition time to help start to bring us down to a place where now we start to feel calm and safe, as you mentioned.
And I think it's important too. You think about some children maybe have challenging behaviors, or may not feel safe, may not feel connected, and that this is going to be a time that's hard for them. Typically, is to, like you said, really structure that time and make sure that everyone knows what we're doing. Add a social storybook, add visuals for the routine for them to see, but also to make a connection with them. And so that might be the time that you go over, because we know that our internal state we're co-regulators for the child. We're teaching them to self-regulate, but we're their co-regulator. So just take that moment to co-regulate them. Do you want to help me, do this? I'm just checking in, or just, how you doing? We'll just talk to them for a moment. Give them a butterfly kiss, just whatever.
And I would love the listeners to just kind of, if you miss that, just rewind, just listen to the sound of Leslie's voice. Listen to their tone. right? That looks a lot different than what you might, what you might typically see, right? I said we're going in,
Exactly.
right? So let's tell the truth. Like, I mean, Leslie, we keep it very real here. There's two other things I want to mention that made me think about the picture schedule is also in your learning centers, right? Because we want to give children free choice, but there's certain centers that only allow space-wise for a certain number of children. So again, this is where that preventative measures comes in, where you have the pictures that show how many children can go into that space. So that we know, okay, there's already 4 friends in there. I'm going to pick another space, and when a friend leaves, then I can go in. So again, the environment is helping teach what needs to happen, not just the teacher running around all day long. Well, there's too many people, right? And the other thing I think too might be helpful in the drop off and pick up, because again, children need to feel safe and secure, is maybe having a little safe space in your classroom where maybe when a child is coming in and they need a little extra, maybe have some stuffed animals in a cozy bag, like something where a child can be surrounded by coziness and softness, right? And then they can enter into the day in a way that feels good for them.
Yeah. Because that home to school and school to home transition, like you're saying, can be very challenging for young children. You don't know what happened on the way to school. Was there a big upset with the frustration with the parent? Did something happen? Did they wake up late, get rushing in, didn't really get to connect with the parent as much as maybe they would like? So they're coming to you kind of already feeling what just happened. Where's my person going? I'm being left here. And so anything that you can do to, as you say, structure that and then I think that greeting piece, if we can really give them eye contact and our presence in that moment, kind of assess what's going on, reattend them, I think goes a long way. If they need to go to the safe space, safe place, safe spot, I've heard it called lots of different things.
Yeah.
And rest for a moment, that can be so helpful. I also like trying to give the parents a moment of connection, some ritual that they can do as they're leaving, whether it's see you later, alligator, sort of little handshake.
We got the window.
Yes, the window.
We have the parent window.
Like a butterfly goodbye, see you later. Or fly butterfly. Sweet little things that they can do to have that.
I love that. So how do you foster a sense of belonging and inclusion for children who might feel marginalized or misunderstood due to their challenging behaviors?
I think it's so important to bring about the idea of a school family and to bring those children back into the family and let them know they were never not a part of the family. So what that might look like is to, when the upset is happening or in the classroom, is to, for one teacher, if there's 2 teachers in the classroom, for one teacher to be helping the child who is in the upset, and for the other teacher to be helping the children who are watching and possibly going to be triggered themselves by it or not really, they want to help somehow, is to have them send good thoughts to the other child. Leslie is having a hard time. Let's just take a moment, and she's part of our school family. Let's breathe and send her some good thoughts because we love her. And so that teacher is helping those children see the child differently. And then once everything is kind of all calm again, you want to bring that child back in with some sort of ritual, some sort of little tradition that you do. We are a family. We are a school family. We're in this together. We have your back, whatever you want to make up and go along with, and bring that child back in. We're all okay. We're all good.
Yeah. So we, at our preschool, we have, we use the kindness bucket, and so we instill that as part, through our curriculum. And you see it a lot on the playground when someone falls down and skins their knee, and like 20 nurses all arrive. All the students are walking their friend as though they have, a broken leg, and it's really not even bleeding, but we need the Band-Aid, So that community is so important. And this is really great, fascinating stuff. So it is no surprise to me why so many people tune into your podcast.
Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. So let's, before we wrap up, let's talk a little bit about how do we collaborate with families and caregivers to ensure that there's that consistency and alignment between home and educational environments, because we can do all that we can do in the air, but if there isn't that consistency and cohesion, it sometimes becomes a little unraveled.
Yeah. And one thing I always try to encourage teachers, because sometimes they will be frustrated. They think I'm doing all this in the classroom, but I know they go home and that they're still, especially children who've experienced trauma, still maybe their environment still isn't going to be supportive. And I always try to encourage them and say that, but you're showing them another way. Yeah. They now have a choice. You may not see the fruits of your efforts this year, but you have exposed the child to this, and they're going to have a choice later. So I just wanted to throw that in as just a word of encouragement to teachers. But I try to focus on, so let's say a challenging behavior happens in the classroom, and trying to share the positive things that happen in the classroom, I think is important with the teacher, with the family, not just the challenging behavior.
Absolutely.
Because if there were 7 hours in the day that the child was there and they did one thing that was challenging, they had a lot of instances of very positive things that happened. And so we want to share that. So then let's say that the child, one of the children was one of the ones fighting over the car that we talked about earlier. And we're going to have spent just a little bit of time helping them breathe and handle their disappointment that they couldn't have a turn right then. So I might share with the parent, well, Leslie chose to do a balloon breathing today when she felt frustrated because she couldn't have a turn with the truck. And so she threw the truck, but we did some balloon breathing afterwards, and that's how she handled her distress. Maybe you can practice balloon breathing when we feel frustration, because we all feel frustration sometimes. So I'm going to use that moment to teach them what I did with the child.
And I love that. So Leslie, I would, in that scenario, because I've done this before, I would include the child in that conversation, because they're waiting for you to say, go through the truck. And so I might say, we had a little bit of a challenge, but here's how they turned it around.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud of them, and I know they feel proud too, right?
Yeah.
So that's because, again, we want to reinforce what we want to happen and what should happen, instead of reinforcing they got mad, they threw the truck, because, again, all the emphasis is on we threw the truck instead of how we handle that, how we can do better next time. Now we have those skills. I can't wait to see you use those in practice. That's where we focus, right?
Yes,
that's where we focus.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I get it.
That's beautiful. So the more we can communicate that to parents.
Yes, absolutely. And and sometimes in your programs you may have, and I'm not generalizing, but you may have a first-time parent who maybe this is their first experience, or they don't have a lot of additional support outside of the center. So they may come to you as the professional, like, gee, I need some help, or, I'm really struggling around this, because the parents struggle too. And so all that we can do to help support them. And I like to do it both in person, but also make it part of your school culture by adding in your newsletters, like different tips and strategies. I know many centers deal with toddlers who are biting. So instead of being like, hey, Miss Jones, can you come in the office? I can tell you how your kid has bit, the 50th kid this week, right? Add some things in there so that parent doesn't feel like you're targeting them or you're talking down to them. That's a great way to pay attention to what's going on in your school, and add some pieces, educational pieces, into your parent newsletter, or invite professionals to come on in and do a parent workshop. And then I think too, when parents know it's not just their one child that's struggling, but there's multiple children, you feel a little better, right? Because it's people, and we're talking about people's babies, you take it personal. I'm a mama, I take it personal, right? When they look at it as a reflection of that they're not being a great parent. Children struggle. We're grown-ups. Think about when you go home from work, right? Is every day at work the best day ever? Or are there days that you come home from work and throw your bag and go, I don't want to talk about it, right? Yeah. We do it too as adults, right? So we got to give these little people a little bit of a break. I could talk, I could talk to you all day. So what I'm going to say is, Leslie, is there anything I didn't ask you that you would like to leave the listeners on this topic?
I think it's important to bring grace into the children's behavior, to look at it, and I said this earlier, as though so they're missing a skill, and to, let's say a child has a behavior. I'm not going to focus on the negative. I'm not going to assume a negative. I hear parents or teachers say, no, they're just so mean. They're not nice to the other kids. If we can really look at children as, they just need me to teach them something. They're just missing a skill. So what skill is it, and how can I teach it to them? And I think the other way we can help parents and also our staff is to realize that, they go through that survival emotional state too. And so if we can help teachers feel safe, help parents feel safe, build relationships with our teachers as directors, build relationships with our parents as staff and teachers, then we can teach them what it is they want to know. So relationship is key across the board.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So thank you so, so much for being a wonderful guest on our show. We are going to leave the links on how folks can get a hold of you, or if they want to check out your podcast, which I'm sure they will after hearing this episode. We'll put it in the show links below. If you're watching this on YouTube, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We're so super close to our goal there, so we appreciate that. And I want you to remember, it's the small details that make a big impact on the success of your childcare business. So thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, have a great day.
Well, all the cute little kiddos have been picked up and it's time to go home. And that'll do it for another episode of the Child Care Director's Chair. Please leave a review so Erica knows the information is helping you to manage and improve your childcare centers. Remember to subscribe to get the latest episode from Erica's Child Care Director's Chair.